Welcome to Newshour, I'm Shone. Liverpool Football Club's title-winning parade was meant to be a celebration of unity and pride. Instead, it was overshadowed by chaos and fear. A car drove into crowds gathered along Water Street, injuring dozens and sending shockwaves through the city and the country. The suspect, a 53-year-old man, was arrested at the scene. Police have ruled out terrorism, but questions are far from over. What drives someone to act with such violence, and how did this happen at such a major public event when thousands in attendance? Well, tonight we look at the human impact and the political aftermath. How are fans responding emotionally to this moment of crisis? And what responsibilities do local authorities and national leaders bear when celebration turns to trauma? Well, joining us is a Liverpool supporter from This Is Anfield to share the wider fans' community's response, and a political commentator to examine what this means for policy, policing and public trust. But first, let's take a look at what happened in detail.
A car plowed into a crowd of Liverpool soccer fans during a parade in the English city on Monday, injuring dozens of people. Ambulance officials say 27 people were hospitalized after the attack, with 2 in serious condition. They say 4 of the 27 were children. The parade was celebrating Liverpool's Premier League victory last month. Police said they did not believe the incident was terrorism-related, and that they had arrested a man they believed to be the driver. They said he was a, quote, 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area. They were unusually quick to give that description. A former chief superintendent in London's Metropolitan Police told the BBC this was an effort to cool speculation that the episode was an Islamist attack. With most people off work for the UK's spring bank holiday, hundreds of thousands of fans had gathered to watch the Liverpool team and its staff travel through the city centre on an open-top bus with the Premier League trophy. An eyewitness told BBC Radio that people were only alerted to the danger by screams from the crowd. That allowed some to jump out of the way when the driver showed no sign of slowing down. Videos on social media showed people thrown into the air as the car rammed into spectators. When the car stopped, angry fans converged on it and began smashing the windows as police officers intervened to prevent them from reaching the driver.
Liverpool FC issued a statement expressing deep concern and offering support to those affected, while Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the event appalling.
Well, scenes of joy turned to utter horror and devastation, and my thoughts and the thoughts of the whole country are with all of those that are affected, those injured, which of course includes children, their families, their friends, the whole community, Liverpool fans everywhere. And Liverpool stands together, and the whole country stands with Liverpool.
Questions are now being raised about security arrangements for large-scale public events. Critics have pointed to potential lapses in crowd control and vehicle access, while others are calling for a broader conversation around mental health and the rise in vehicle-related attacks in public spaces. As investigations continue, the emotional toll on those who witnessed the event is becoming increasingly apparent. Mental health professionals have warned of the lasting trauma such incidents can cause, particularly for children and families caught in the chaos. The city of Liverpool, while known for its resilience, now finds itself in mourning and reflection. As authorities piece together the motivations behind the attack, the focus also turns to how such tragedies can be prevented in future, and how a city can begin to heal.
Okay, let's now head over to our correspondent in London, Ollie Barrett, for the very latest on this story.
Well, I think there's a huge level of shock, Guy, still at what unfolded on Monday in Liverpool. A huge amount of disappointment from Liverpool fans and others about what was supposed to be a celebration and ended up being really clouded by this shocking event, this episode towards the end of the parade in Liverpool. Obviously, huge amounts of questions that remain unanswered. We heard from the Prime Minister there giving us some sense of his views on the issue at the moment. One of the key questions has been about the police response, in the sense that they suggested very quickly, actually, after the incident unfolded, the identity of the man that had been arrested, describing him as a 53-year-old British white man. Now, that is understood to have been because police were concerned about some of the speculation swirling online about what kind of incident this might have been. Was it a terror-related incident, for example? And this is a police force that was criticised a year ago after the Southport attack, when there was an information void online which led to a huge amount of speculation, much of it false information and disinformation, before police came forward with further details to clarify things. That has been put as a question to Number 10 today, Downing Street, telling us, though, that in being asked a question by journalists about whether the Prime Minister supports police being more forthcoming with details like that after an incident like this, the Prime Minister's spokesman would only say to us political journalists that it's always up to police operationally to decide what info goes into the public domain and when. And the Prime Minister's spokesman telling us that the PM believes that it is right that police are operationally independent, not really wanting to get drawn too much further into that. One of the other things that the incident in Liverpool has shown is community cohesion. By that I mean the many people who live in the city coming forward with offers of help, to help with the clean-up, to help get people home if they are taxi drivers and people were struggling to get out of the city, which had been so busy with so many supporters there. There had been people offering their homes for people who were stuck and wanted a place to warm up and get some Wi-Fi and try and find a route out of the city back to where they had come from. We've also seen support coming in from other Premier League clubs, including, of course, Liverpool's fierce local rivals Everton. And Everton have been saying today that they hope that anyone who has any information on this incident can go straight to the police with it. For many Liverpool fans, obviously desperately disappointing that they had gathered for this trophy parade in a way that they hadn't been able to do back at the turn of the decade, when Liverpool last won a Premier League title during the COVID pandemic, and a Premier League trophy parade was therefore, for that reason, not possible. And this one did take place. Over 1 million people, we think, turned out on the streets of Liverpool to see it, and then there was this awful incident at the end of it. So real mixed emotions, but there was also the emotion of relief that there weren't any fatalities as a result of this vehicle moving very quickly, as we've all seen in those videos, through the streets of central Liverpool. And certainly there is also ongoing concern about those people who've been injured, and some of them injured seriously in this incident. Guy.
Thanks, Ollie. Thank you very much. Ollie Barrett for us there in London. Okay, my first guest today is Matt Ladson, who was actually there when all this unfolded. Matt is an editor at This Is Anfield, which is an independent Liverpool Football Club fan site. Matt, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You were there as these terrible events unfolded. Give us a sense of how the situation panned out on the ground, the response from the emergency services, and what you have seen since then in the few hours since the incident occurred.
It's very, very important to begin by looking at how many people there were and the unprecedented numbers of people, and the fact that also the geography of Liverpool, the layout of the city. So to understand, Liverpool is a port city right by the river, and the Strand where the parade came down, that is the main focal point of the parade, is right by the river. So there's only sort of one way to access the Strand, which is via all the smaller side streets, the tributaries that run down towards the Strand. Now, speaking to people who were at previous parades in 2019 and 2022 most recently, the numbers of people were vastly higher than then, mostly because Liverpool won the league so far in advance that we've all known about this parade. It's been a date in the diary for a very, very long time. I spoke to people that had travelled from not just all around the country, but all around the world. I spoke to people from Ireland, Denmark, Brazil, the Netherlands. This was a fan weekend, a whole celebration of Liverpool Football Club, one that we've been waiting 30, 35 years in order to be able to do so. So the numbers of people were absolutely huge. And the side street that the incident eventually happened on, I walked down it at the beginning of the day. I got dropped off there in a taxi, and we were staying in a rooftop bar right next to where the incident eventually unfolded. And there will be questions raised, and I know that the Mayor of Liverpool has actually already sort of spoke about this, of how the car got down that side tributary, because we decided to stay and allow the crowds to sort of disperse a little bit. And then all of a sudden you saw the police outside and the cordon and the incident support van, and there was an announcement in the bar that we were in that the police were not allowing us to leave, and if we were to do so, we had to leave via a different exit to avoid going onto that street. We did see the aftermath. There was police officers coming into the restaurants, used the toilet facilities to clean. We spoke to a lot of people. I spoke to eyewitnesses on the ground, and a lot of people were very, very shook up. But I think that it's really important to understand that the sheer number of people that were walking up that street, we're talking, shoulder to shoulder would have been going up that street at that time. So quite how any cars had access to that street will be a very, very big question. And it was surreal because nobody had phone signal for hours because there's too many people in one small area. And just 100 yards from the incident on a parallel street, there were people partying, completely unaware of what happened, dancing, singing, and just a real party feel. But then at the same time, there was those people that were aware of what had just happened and maybe witnessed it themselves walking through. So it was a very surreal atmosphere in the immediate aftermath.
And sadly, Matt, obviously this is not the first tragedy that Liverpool supporters have had to deal with. Understandably, some people will have felt the sense of shock, as you say, because they witnessed the event today. Others may feel that sense over the next few days as news of it reaches them and it's discussed more widely. Has there been any sense yet of the club or the local authorities reaching out to provide support, perhaps counselling, perhaps facilities, services to fans who've been very badly shaken up by the incident?
Yeah, I know that that's something that has been messaging has gone out about already, and I know that that's something that the club will be working on in order to ensure that that support is there. I think it's very important to note that Liverpool is an extremely resilient city. I think that as the events of yesterday are unpacked further, there will actually be a wider discussion around the organisation in a wider sort of respect. In order, we're talking about this incident, and this is certainly the main talking point. But there's also questions around the logistics of getting people in, but more out of the city afterward. There's people who were waiting at the train station for maybe 3 or 4 hours in the pouring rain, and it really was biblical rain. And at the end of it, there were no trains, but at the same time, some trains were leaving that were completely empty. Some were leaving that were packed in like sardines again. So the organisational logistics around the trains getting out of the city is another discussion point that I think will be raised. We've seen people of Liverpool, I won't say just Liverpool supporters because it's the people of the city, reach out to provide those who were left stranded in the city with either a bed or a couch to sleep on, somewhere warm and a bit of shelter from the rain, and people giving people lifts to train stations further out of the city, because this was a huge day, and there were families, young people. You have to remember that Anfield Stadium is a 55,000-seater stadium, so maybe 50,000 Liverpool supporters were at the game to watch the team lift the Premier League trophy aloft finally on Sunday. But we're talking, I know that you guys have just said there that there might have been over 1 million, and I would certainly think that would be correct. So it's a huge amount of people that were all in one area of the city, especially down by the waterfront. So there has to be a planning, organisational question around this for when next time it happens.
And Matt, obviously you're a fan yourself. You're very close to many other fans. What are you hoping for over the next few weeks? Obviously there'll be a time, as you say, for that detailed investigation into the logistics of what happens. But what do you feel is most important for the club, the city council to focus on over the short term, the next few weeks ahead?
Well, first and foremost, what we're all looking for is that those who have been injured are able to make a full recovery. That will be uppermost in everybody's thoughts. I think that then the next line will be to make sure that those who have witnessed it and maybe feeling slightly traumatised have the support that they need. We don't really want anybody in a situation where they feel that they can't go into a crowded place or a situation whereby you're walking along a street in this sort of type of environment and not feeling safe. And then obviously, the lessons need to be learned as to how this can be avoided in the future. I know that the road itself, Water Street, Dale Street, was closed off at a certain point. I can't be sure which point that was at the time, but maybe there will be questions of whether there was sufficient bollards in place to close that road to ensure that traffic couldn't come down, because at the end of the day, any cars along that street, they couldn't actually go anywhere, because at the bottom of the road it goes along was the Strand, which was entirely closed off and was due to be closed off several hours thereafter the parade anyway, in order to clean up after the parade. So there was nowhere that a car could actually go. So how there's access there will be a question that I'm sure will be asked quite a lot in the coming weeks.
And finally, Matt, online spaces like This Is Anfield obviously connect a huge number of fans from many different walks of life. What would be your message to perhaps those subscribers, those regular contributors who are struggling a little bit and are looking to possibly get some help? Is there something that you'd recommend they should do to reach out and get that support?
I think it should be important to remember everything that had gone on before this incident, because it was a day of absolute celebration. It was a weekend of absolute celebration. I know people that were at events on Friday night, Saturday evening, Sunday the game itself, and then Monday obviously the parade and the images that were beamed around the world, and absolutely incredible. It really did take your breath away, and the people were exceptionally happy, and the rain didn't dampen our spirits. We'd gone weeks without any rain, and then we got all several weeks of rain in one day. But as you can see, the party was going on, and this is what we need to focus on, is that it was an event that has been tarnished by one incident, but we are a very strong, resilient city, community, supporters, and the supporters will always be there to help each other and to focus on that side of things, because we can't allow incidents like this to carry over and dampen our lives.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us on what must be an extremely difficult day. Matt Ladson from This Is Anfield, we do appreciate your time very much. Okay, let's now go and speak to the political analyst and former mayor, Andy Preston. Andy, thank you very much for joining us. A very difficult day, as we've heard there from the This Is Anfield editor. Fans obviously in a state of shock and confusion. How do incidents like this shape public trust in crowd security? I mean, from your perspective, you've been in charge of a city. You perhaps understand better than most the planning and the contingency efforts that go into trying to keep these big events safe. Obviously, though, every time something happens, a tragedy happens, there's a direct impact in terms of public trust.
Hello, Guy. That's right. Public trust will be shattered for anybody that was in or around that event, and for lots of people watching from home. It's really incredibly difficult to have a mass event where anyone in the public can turn up. And I think the estimates, credible estimates, there are up to 1 million people there yesterday. Quite incredible. 1 million people most of them packed into a relatively small area. To allow those people free movement, to allow those people to mix and mingle and move on and go sideways and backwards, down different streets, requires a huge effort, and it requires some liberty. And that means that if somebody wants to do harm, I'm not saying that this incident was deliberate harm, but if someone wants to do harm, it's very difficult to stop them. And these events are always about balancing the liberty of people to attend with restrictions on movement that would stop wrongdoers and evildoers from carrying out their acts. I think that what does go on and what people don't realise is that for that event and even much smaller events, there will have been a significant armed police presence. There will have been a lot of plainclothes police and other specialist security staff mingling with the public. And I think that what seems to have happened to me, if I dare speculate, the most credible explanation I've seen is that somebody somehow has ended up, due to road closures, in the wrong place. They've taken a wrong turn. They've ended up in closed off areas. And for whatever reason, they've probably followed an emergency vehicle into a closed street. They've followed that vehicle. It's turned off. They've carried on. They've ended up amongst the crowds. They've become agitated, distressed, and irrational, and have somehow then pressed on the accelerator, presumably accidentally, and it's led to chaos. And planning for this event, planning for that, would be pretty much impossible. It doesn't mean that authorities shouldn't learn from what's happened. Authorities have to learn from what's happened, but the most credible explanation is that somebody has tailgated an emergency vehicle, which have access and are allowed access for obvious reasons to the areas where lots of people are. I think that an issue, Guy, sorry, I know you're going to ask me a question there. In fact, I'll stop, you talk.
No, I was just going to say, Andy, if you could, you're one of the few people who has actually been in the room as the mayor of a city planning for big events. Give us an insight into what happens. Is it similar to planning events at a national level? Do you have the most senior police officer, somebody with intelligence services? Tell us what happens and how long before the event, typically, would you need to start that planning process?
So as a matter of routine, there are always conversations with the police on the mechanics of road closures, but then also on the security of which roads to close. But these things are very routine now for the large part. And what people don't realise is that cities and their landscape, the built environment that you see, a lot of what you think is there for decoration is actually there for security. And that's because of the growth in the use of cars as weapons against the public, which we've seen all over Europe, of course, especially in Germany in recent years. So, for example, in Middlesbrough and other places, you used to see bollards that stopped cars. Now you might see huge, heavy planting pots containing flowers, trees, shrubs, and things like that. And while they fulfill a purpose, which is to make the area look a bit softer, a bit prettier, they're really there to stop cars gaining unauthorized and dangerous access. And that's a really common thing. So the landscape of towns and cities is changing significantly. The intelligence of policing, I'm old enough to remember in the 70s and 80s, there was significant terrorism in the UK. And it was actually all coming from Irish nationalists. And since that ended and went away some 20, 30 years ago, the growth in terrorism has all been about Islamism and terrorist acts by Islamists. And so that's why the police immediately released a little bit of information about the person behind the driver of the car, the person that has caused these incidents and these injuries, being a local man and white British, to try and make sure not to remove anxiety and concern about the incident itself, but to put a lid on speculation that it was some kind of Islamist or other group trying to maliciously attack people. And that's really important, by the way, that happened. And long may that continue, that the police use information where possible to reassure and control knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah, we have seen, haven't we, in the past, that anti-Muslim hatred, civil disobedience spark up from assumptions made about tragic situations. So you think that was a very smart move by the police to actually be very specific in the way that they identified the suspect?
I think so. I mean, what I saw immediately, as soon as information started to break about a terrible incident, huge numbers of injuries involving a car driving at relatively high speed through a crowd, Twitter and other social media platforms were alive with speculation about Islamist terrorism. And I think that could have very, very quickly got completely out of hand. And the police did well, I think, to put a lid on it. Of course, the people that seek to spread spite use the fact that the police identified the man's ethnicity and hold that against the police and the authorities, saying that they never do that when the victim doesn't have white skin. The police acted sensibly, and the police sought to put a lid on it, not cause more anxiety, not cause more trouble, and hopefully not lead to incitements of violence. So I think they did exactly the right thing.
And Andy, another question for someone who has held public office. When you're in a position of authority in a community, whether it be the head of a football club, the most senior police officer, or a politician from local or national government, how do you go about the process of restoring public trust after something so awful has happened?
Well, I've personally never experienced a major issue like this, so I can't comment on this, but basically there are two truths. One is that people feel shattered, confused. The world and the safe world that they knew has gone away, at least temporarily, and that will impact their well-being. We know at the moment, of course, that mental health issues are significant amongst and widespread across the public. This will further damage that. It will make anxious people more anxious about going into public places where there are crowds, and it will make people who aren't currently anxious or weren't become anxious. So it's a major issue. I think that the only way that this can be dealt with is by reassuring messages, and I'm afraid to say lots of time. Time is a great healer, and people don't forget, but they do begin to feel more comfortable. So I think an effort has got to be made to get people out. Perhaps it's a follow-up parade, perhaps it's some kind of civic event, something that celebrates Liverpool and its resilience. It's a fantastic city, and gets more people out on the street. And when people see that go on without major incidents like this, confidence will slowly start to return. But at the moment, when this happens, when it happened in Germany at the Christmas markets and other places, it impacts the events, it impacts well-being, and it impacts commerce, because more people are scared to go out and shop and buy things.
Andy Preston, thank you as always for joining us and for your analysis. Thank you. Monday night's events then have shaken a city and stunned a nation. What should have been a celebration of footballing triumph became a moment of reckoning on safety, policy and public trust. Well, as investigations continue, Liverpool's resilience will be tested once again. That's all from us here at AnewZ. Thanks for watching NewsHour, and see you next time.